Penguin Random House Audio presents The Ascent, A House Can Have Many Secrets, by Stefan Hertmans, translated from the Dutch by David McKay, read for you by Nicholas Guy Smith. Can you see the animal running, always in the same way? Alessandro Barrico, The Barbarians, translated by Stephen Sartorelli. In the first year of the new millennium, a book came into my hands from which I learned that for 20 years I had lived in the house of a former SS man. Not that I hadn't received any signals. Even the notary, the day I visited the house with him, had mentioned the previous occupants in passing. But at the time, my thoughts were elsewhere. And maybe I repressed the knowledge, saturated as I had been for years with the harrowing poems of Paul Celan, the testimonies of Primo Levi, the countless books and documentaries that leave you speechless, the inability of a whole generation to describe the unthinkable. Now I saw my intimate memories invaded by a reality I could scarcely imagine, but could push away no longer. It was as if phantoms haunted the rooms I'd known so well. I had questions for them, but they walked straight through me. There was nothing I was so loath to do as write about the kind of person who now began wandering the corridors of my life like a ghost. I recalled the day I noticed the house for the first time. It must have been in the late summer of 1979. I was walking through a dusty city park bordered by a row of old houses. Through the gaps between the fence posts, I glimpsed the backyards. Winding through the rusty rails of one of these fences were the thick, near-black branches of a wisteria. A few late clusters of flowers hung low, sprinkled with dust. But their fragrance touched a deep place, taking me back to the overgrown garden of my childhood. Curious, I stopped for a better look through the fence. What I saw was a small, neglected urban garden where a slender maple shot up among nondescript clutter, a coal shed with a little left-over firewood under a layer of black dust. Some 16 feet away, the broken window of a run-down annex, and next to that, a porch with a high-arched window offering a view of the interior all the way to the other side. I stared straight through the dark, empty rooms. The front windows gleamed with vague light from afar. A strange excitement ran through me. I walked out of the park and made a U-turn onto a small, dark street in an old part of town. There I found it. A large townhouse with a pock-marked front into which moisture had eaten its way over time. With its high windows and flaking front door, the building had known better days. It was obvious it had been vacant for some years. In one window hung a sign, "For sale," wrinkled from the damp. It began to drizzle, as it can only drizzle in old cities. The copper flap of the mail slot gave a brief, gloomy rattle in a gust of wind. The district is called Pottershol, named after the narrow canal that gave access to the monastery in the Middle Ages, through which the Potters, the monks, would bring in stocks of food and, as the story goes, smuggle whores inside. The area once belonged to the Counts of Flanders. This historic district is next to a 12th century fortress and was, for centuries, the home of the city's leading dynasties and the haute bourgeoisie. With the rise of the proletariat in the 19th century, many stately buildings were replaced with working-class housing. Poverty set in, and over the years the district developed a bad reputation. The narrow alleyways and cul-de-sacs fell into decay until the student revolt of the late 1960s, when bohemian artists settled there. The house I was looking at was on the northeastern edge of the district, on a side street called Drogenhof, not far from where the slow, dark Ley River, the Belgian section of the Ley, flows past the damp old houses. The crucial decisions in my life have rarely been calculated. Time after time, I found myself in a kind of dream state, as if an invisible hand is prodding me forward, or as if I've become the pure fool of legend, strolling forth to meet my fate like a headless chicken. I pulled a notepad out of my worn peacoat and jotted down the telephone number. The building was owned by a French-speaking family, the de Poters. That same day, I called Mr. de Poter, a lawyer in the distinguished profession of civil law notary, who represented the family and was also acting as the real estate agent for the house. We planned my visit for 2 days later. The family was eager to get several buildings off their hands as soon as possible, before a planned revaluation that would increase their property taxes. During my viewing of the house, I saw the mildew and damp, the stale water in the flooded cellar, and here and there a mouldering piece of furniture, but also the high stairwell, the beautiful brown and pink marble of the fireplace in the front room, the lustrous black Ardennes stone in the long hallway, fringed with grey-veined Carrara marble, the large upstairs rooms with their broad floorboards, the powerful pull of an unknown life. We went from cellar to attic, an ascent that took more than 2 hours because Mr. de Poter had to draw up a detailed report on the state of the building, in my presence and with my approval. In the attic, I saw a length of rope dangling from a dusty beam. A few tiles were missing from the high-peaked roof. You could see the grey city sky. Somewhere, I heard the flapping of pigeons' wings. I have always had a weakness for the odour of damp and decay in old houses. As a child, born not long after the war, I must have walked hand in hand with my mother past houses damaged in bombings. So maybe to me, the smell of wet stone and mildew is something like Proust's famous Madeleine. When you're a child and still free of memory, even the stench of decay is a source of happiness. I bought the property on impulse, for a sum that would not even buy me a mid-size car today. Since I was not wealthy, I borrowed the money, interest-free, from my father, promising to repay him in monthly installments as soon as I could. In those days, many buyers paid cash. I can still see my father's spotless hands counting out his carefully saved bills onto the notary's calfskin desk blotter. The book was entitled Zoon van een foute Vlaming, son of a bad Fleming. Everyone knew what fout, bad, meant in this context. He had sided with the German occupiers in the war. The first time I saw the austere cover, I was struck by the unconventional German quotation marks. The author, Adriaan Verhulst, was a former history professor. In fact, I'd been one of his students myself. He'd earned a dazzling academic reputation, chaired the boards of cultural organizations and the Public Broadcasting Company, written countless scholarly articles, and become well known for both his broad-mindedness and his strict, stubborn personality. Toward the end of his life, he published his difficult confession. When I came to his recollection of the house where he'd spent his childhood, and he mentioned that I was the current resident. I stared in disbelief.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?